All right, with me now to help us unpack how things went and where things might go is a panel of esteemed former ambassadors. I'm thrilled to have them with us this evening. David MacNaughton is a former Canadian ambassador to the U.S. who served during Donald Trump's first term. Frank McKenna served as Canadian ambassador to the U.S. from 2005 to 2006. And Derek Burney was chief of staff to former Prime Minister, the late Brian Mulroney, and Canadian ambassador to the U.S. from 1989 to 1993. It's a pleasure to see all of you. Thank you very much for making time for the conversation. Mr. MacNaughton, I'll start with you because you spent a long time on the Canadian side when it came to dealing with Donald Trump the first go around. You've obviously, been privy to a lot of the stuff that's gone down this time around. What is your read on the significance of a tonal change that appeared to emerge through this meeting in the Oval Office?
Well, I think it's helpful. Obviously, it's a lot better if you can have civility in the discussion. Having said that, I mean, there's still a long way to go. People talk about this being a trade negotiation, but the reality is we've got a trade agreement with the United States. Donald Trump said it was the best trade deal ever, and yet, he's using a YIPA and Section 232 that says that Canada is a national security threat with steel and aluminum and lumber and a whole series of other things. This is not going to be easy, and we're going to have to put on the table a lot more than just trade. It's going to be a discussion about security and defense, and are we really allies in defense and security? And if so, then there's no need for tariffs that suggest that Canada is some sort of a national security threat. So I think it's a good start, but it's really complicated and it's going to take a while.
Do you think that framing, Mr. Burney, that we also heard from the Prime Minister, that essentially these are discussions that will involve the fullness of the relationship when it comes to security and the economy? So he's not saying like this is NAFTA negotiations. Again, it's this wider framing. Do you think that's accurate?
Well, that's how it was supposed to be. But I have to say, I found that the tone was positive. But as David implied, when you get to the substance, it was often contradictory. At least that's the most diplomatic term I can use for it. Because Donald Trump has these absurd notions that we are selling them things that they don't need, which is ridiculous. It's poppycock, and he should know that. I mean, the oil, the uranium, the aluminum, the steel, the electricity, the potash that we are selling is not because of the color of our eyes. It's because Americans need those things. And for him to deny that and at the same time support the USMCA, it's hard to make sense of where he's coming from on trade in particular. I thought the Prime Minister did a solid job on the sovereignty point. He was firm, but he did it in a good spirit, which is the best way you can handle it with a guy like Donald Trump. He said the right things about defense, which we all would agree is a vulnerability for Canada if we're going to get into a national security debate. But, if the Americans have problems with the fairness of our trade, and if the president still supports the USMCA, why don't they use the dispute settlement mechanisms that are there to air those kind of complaints instead of just doing it with irrational comments repeatedly to their public? It boggles the mind. So, yeah, good tone, good start, better than it could have been, especially dealing with somebody as contradictory as Donald Trump. But we got a long way to go to get out of the woods on this one.
Yeah, Mr. McKenna, Mr. Burney brings up a good point about how difficult it is to reconcile all the different things Donald Trump said about the trading relationship between our two countries. The only thing I would maybe ask you about in that vein is the fact that we've now got two groupings of Canadian goods, including more recently auto parts, that all of a sudden behind the scenes became exempt from the tariffs that Donald Trump was saying would apply to them because they are, so-called USMCA compliant. Do you think that offers a bit of a window into the possibility that there is a tacit acknowledgement, at least in his administration, if not, completely not overtly in this meeting, but tacitly through his administration, that agreement means something? I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying that we've set the bar very low when the fact that the president respected our prime minister and that we were able to say we weren't for sale is kind of the takeaways from the meeting. The actual fact is it was a good meeting because of what took place afterwards, where the parties went inside a room and rolled up their sleeves and had a good conversation about the issues and started a process. But I think that we have to realize as Canadians, we have a strong bargaining position. Contrary to what the president says, we do provide the raw materials that helps fuel the U.S. economy, and we're the biggest purchaser of their goods, which Prime Minister Carney alluded to. And I don't think it's an accident that they walked back some of the auto tariffs because they were feeling the pain. Every time there's a pain point, this president tends to budge. And similarly, with respect to the 25% so-called fentanyl tariffs, they've walked that all the way back so that anything which is CUSMA compliant is not obliged to pay those tariffs. So I don't feel any sense of negativity because the president said, look, we're not backing away from tariffs. He will. If there's pain and if he's got constituencies that push him hard enough, he will back away. And our position is a strong one, and I think we should play the hand strong.
If we are about, as the Prime Minister indicated, Mr. MacNaughton, to embark on these sort of widely framed negotiations, I was listening closely in his press conference as he sort of detailed, look, it's going to be a negotiation. We're not going to talk about, be able to measure progress through every step of it. But I was thinking to myself, like, what is the Canadian objective? What is ultimately the objective at the end of the day through that negotiation? Is it to just save the furniture, or in your view, should it be something different?
Well, I think there's an opportunity to develop a closer defense and security arrangement. I think as we all acknowledge, we haven't been doing as much as we should, and yet we've got a really great story about Canada's contribution to military and defense and security for years. I guess the thing that worries me more than anything is, when you look at the other people that were in the room, I mean, you've got, you got Lutnick, who goes and repeats a lot of Donald Trump's crazy, things about $200 billion subsidies. J.D. Vance, who, is mouthing the same kind of thing. And then, I guess you could say, Marco's, Rubio's probably the most sensible. You got Stephen Miller hanging around there, who's a real problem. I mean, at least in the last go-round, we had Bob Lighthizer, who was protectionist, but he was smart and he paid attention to facts. I mean, you could actually have a sensible discussion without all these extraneous, stupid, bogus issues being raised. So I do think it's going to be challenging. But, the other thing the Prime Minister said, which I think we all need to keep in mind, is we have a job to do at home, too. We have a lot of things that we need to be doing to get our act together that we have been delaying, whether that is, getting natural gas to Asia to reduce coal usage, whether it be, getting critical minerals out of the ground. I mean, I remember in Washington, I raised with the National Security Advisor about critical minerals many years ago, and he said, David, we'd love to have your critical minerals, but we need them before you get them out of the ground in 2050. And I think this is a wake-up call for us while we're going on negotiating with Donald Trump and his gang. We need to also be spending our time focusing on what can we do in terms of getting our act together in Canada, whether it be, free trade with, among the provinces, whether it be diversifying our markets, whatever it is. This is a wake-up call, and we can't just simply, hope that somehow or other this is going to pay dividends. I think it will, but as Frank said, I think it's going to take some time, and he's going to have to feel some pain from the tariffs, and the businesses are going to have to feel some pain before he backs off.
Mr. Burney, I wanted to pick up on that point and get your sense, because you're very plugged into the reaction in the U.S., which, as we've talked about before, was quite tepid through the first 100 days of this administration. Do you anticipate that changing, and do you think it will have an impact on Trump backing down ultimately at some point?
I think we should keep one thing in mind, and that is that China is the real target for Donald Trump and the administration. And depending on how that goes, that's going to affect everybody else in terms of their relations with the United States. I hate to say that we're a bit of a sideshow, but in fact, we are. Their priority is to deal with China and stop China cold. They're doing it. 145% tariffs have visited a lot of pain on the Chinese economy. Who's going to flinch first? Because the pain's going to come to the U.S. when there's a shortage of goods coming in from China, and their ports are suffering accordingly, their truckers are suffering. That's where real pain is going to come. So I think we have to keep our eye on the ball with China and react accordingly. Everybody here agrees we have strengths to bring to bear if it comes to a civil negotiation. But I would certainly emphatically agree with David. We better get our act together better at home so that we have a competitive position to bring to bear in any negotiation with the United States. Today, we don't have that. Our economic performance, our productivity, our standard of living are all on the downside compared to the United States. We can't let that continue. That should be the Prime Minister's top priority. He can't take his eye off the ball with Washington, but he's got to start fixing the economy at home in order to strengthen our capacity to deal with an erratic USA, because we're going to live with it for another 3 years.
Mr. McKenna, the last word goes to you.
Well, look, amen to that. It's absolutely true. We've got a lot of fixing up the house at home. But we also, I want to make this clear, we also have to remember this is a two-way border. I remember Margaret Atwood's famous statement that the border's like a one-way mirror. We see the United States and they see the United States. We need to get them to see us and see our issues. A couple of examples. We've lost about $80 billion by shipping oil to the Americans, which is effectively subsidizing them. Softwood lumber, there's $10 billion in escrow because they're obstructing our softwood lumber going across the border. Guns coming into Canada, responsible for over 70% of the murders in this country. I think we have a right to put those issues on the table when we get into the negotiations. And on China, because Derek is dead right, that's going to be a big issue. But we're paying a price, and the Americans have to understand it. We just put a tariff up against e-vehicles from China, and it's cost us $5 billion plus in canola and seafood in tariffs from China. That's very painful for our people. We apprehended Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States of America. We had 2 diplomats spend 1,000 days in jail in China, as well as sanctions on Canada. So we've paid a price for being a friend to the United States of America, and I think that needs to be on the table as well.
Lots for us to keep our eyes on, as you all explain, over the coming months and I guess 3 years. Thank you very much for making the time for the discussion. I appreciate all your insights. Frank McKenna, Derek Burney, and David MacNaughton, all 3 former Canadian ambassadors to the United States.